Hi, this is Paul Sanneman, and I'm the founder of Contractor Staffing Source, where we help contractors build great teams. I'm doing business success tips, which is where you learn to make more money in less time and have more fun. I have my guest, Darren Kornas, who's the founder of On Budget Construction Bookkeeping. And I've known Darren for a long time. We go way back, don't we, Darren?
Longer than we both care to admit.
Longer than we both care to admit. Yeah, many, many years ago. So I want to have Darren on because he's recently started something which I think you would be of interest to you guys because it's a problem. Why don't you just give me your history and how you came up with it, Darren? Give me your backstory.
Yeah, so I started my construction career. I established a custom building firm in 2008, right after the downfall, after losing my position with a development firm. And steadily just, tool bags on at the beginning, like a lot of guys in this industry, myself and a couple of carpenters, just through, a lot of hard work and just connecting myself with the right people, which, I count you in that group, as long as we've been going on together now. Just making the right moves and some good decisions and getting some good advice over the years, managed to grow this business into an entity that it is today. The construction company enabled me to be able to start running it remotely 4 years ago. I live in Atlanta, but the company currently runs in the DC, Maryland, and Virginia area. And I attribute a big part of that to having just a good bookkeeping system set up that
Now, just
works
dive a little deeper.
remotely.
So, Think, Make, Build does about what volume and what size projects, just so people get an
Yeah,
idea.
yeah. So Think Make Build does just shy of 15 million a year. Most of the projects start at 1.5 up to just south of 7 is a typical
Okay.
sweet spot for most projects. Um, it's a typical construction scenario, full-time project managers, full-time superintendents on site, like working for kind of upper echelon. We're not a spec home builder. We don't do speculative construction for sale. All of our stuff is for private clients with architects. Most of our projects are, come to us through architect and interior design pipeline, uh, not directly from clients all the time. Uh, but we just found through doing that, one of the things we did really well was just our paperwork and back of house administrative work. And after seeing how crucial that is to having a company run smoothly without, a lot of hair pulling by the owner, uh, our office manager and I decided, hey, this is something I think we can start doing for other contractors. Because I know early on when I started out, and you probably hear this from a lot of the clients you work with, like one of the hardest things at the beginning is, trying to stay on top of the finances and trying to find a good bookkeeper who really understands construction, not just an accounting company that says, well, we can do your bookkeeping, but they don't know the difference between a 2x4 and a 2x6. We found having that institutional knowledge has just gone a long way to making what we do for our clients have more value. Uh,
Okay. So as a contractor now starting accounting and bookkeeping company or bookkeeping company for contractors, um, what do you see as contractors? Because the audience here is mostly contractors between 2
yeah.
and 10 million. What their biggest problems are and how you solved it.
I'd say the two biggest things we see is one, someone who's currently using QuickBooks Online. And QuickBooks Online might work great if you're, a 1 or 2 man show doing, basement remodels, maybe a bathroom. But as soon as you start getting into a situation where you got a lot of subcontractors, you have employees, you have clients who demand a little more in terms of the financial accountability and financial reporting, you quickly outgrow QuickBooks Online. And the biggest failing of QuickBooks Online is it cannot do what we call job cost accounting, which in construction, when you do your estimate for your projects, everyone knows you have all these line items of all these items that go into your job. QuickBooks Online does not have a way to look at those items separate from what you see on a profit and loss statement. In QuickBooks
What
Online,
about the rumor that they're phasing out QuickBooks on, desktop and just moving to QuickBooks Online? You think that's
yeah,
true?
that's not true. We've looked
Okay.
into that because we've heard that from a couple of people. Not true. They are phasing out a couple of aspects of desktop versions, but not their contractors. Uh, current version. That would be foolish because contractors are a lot of QB's bread and butter. They do, but I don't know. I can't say I know many contractors, colleagues, or clients that aren't using QuickBooks to do their books unless they get to, unless they're doing, well, I mean, I know companies are doing, close to 100 million that are still using QuickBooks, desktop version, set up properly, it can work. So what we see typically, is a company that's using QuickBooks Online, not really getting the information out of it that they need because they've grown and they want to switch to something where they can really start analyzing their financial data. The other scenario we see a lot of someone who's using QuickBooks Desktop, but it's, they have either a part-time bookkeeper that doesn't really understand construction, and a lot of things are falling between the cracks, or they're using outside services. Once again, their core competency is not construction. So there's a lot of things that come in that just kind of get pushed to the side, where a lot of folks that work with contract bookkeeping services, everyone knows they'll have just kind of just one category for everything that you haven't assigned a cost to, for what project does it go to, what cost code does it get attributed to. And a lot of companies, they'll just keep taking all these costs and just keep dumping it into one category until you look at it. And for us, knowing that's the quickest way to get into trouble, because I know just from my own experience of running a construction company and what I've seen other folks run into, like the quickest way to go out of business is to lose sight of how much money you're making on a job or how much money you plan on making. And
So how
it's
often should people know that? Once a week, once a month, how often should they?
every payroll at a minimum, which most companies are doing payroll biweekly. So every 2 weeks, you should have a good snapshot of where you are financially at any good given point in time, really. And that's at a minimum. Really, it should be, daily. You should be able to jump in there and know everything that's been loaded, to that point. But it's what we see. I mean, this industry has a huge failure rate, and I saw it myself, going through this industry. I started a construction company because I like construction. I like carpentry. I do not like doing finances and bookkeeping and putting things into the computer for QuickBooks. And for us, that's where trying to hire someone to do that full time, it's, you got to be doing a decent amount of volume to be able to hire a full-time person to do that for you. So for us, we feel like, the company that's doing, only a couple million, we make it, economically feasible for them to be able to hire someone who's giving them good, solid data from a company that's learned by making their own mistakes of, what works and what doesn't work.
So let's assume for whatever reason, they're not going to hire you. That's not always an option. But if they don't hire you, what should they do themselves to make sure that it works?
For them, in the most, to make it simple for yourself, if you're using, and I would say learn QuickBooks Desktop, get away from QuickBooks Online as soon as you can. And the easiest way, if you're doing it, if you absolutely have to do it yourself, or it's you and your wife or partner,
Right.
doing the books for you, just try and make it as simple as you can. Like we do an estimate for a project. We have 300 and some online items in there. That's a lot of stuff to think of. It's a lot of paperwork to push. It's a lot of categories to think of. If you want the most dumbed down version, do something, do it definitely by project at a bare minimum, so the Jones residence. But rather than having 300 line items in there, keep your amount of items very simple. Maybe just keep it to what they call the 16 divisions, of construction.
They should use CSI codes versus NHP codes.
Yeah, just like if you're going to keep it basic, just stick to the 16 CSI codes and just code everything to that. Don't break that down into another 20 codes underneath each division. Make it simple for yourself, so at least you can get the data in there. Or at heaven forbid, worst case scenario, at least just get it into the right job. The right job. At least so that what that job is costing you, even if you don't know, to the last penny. At least it's going to the right job. So separating job costs from expenses.
So
Everything
now when
that's
you're
overhead.
tracking by CSI codes, when you're into QuickBooks, do you do it on accrual or cash or the day it's spent? How does that work?
Cash. Typically for us, the IRS wants most construction companies to report on a cash basis. When we look at our reports for projects, we do it on a cash, basis, to date.
So how do you work in things like work in progress? Doesn't that screw things up or not?
Yeah, work in progress is important, and in this industry, it's extremely important to know, not just what you spent to date, but what you plan on spending at any given point in time for the project. That's the quickest way, especially with the contractors that take large deposits up front. Uh, you'll feel like you have a lot of money in the bank, but as you know, that's most of the time it's not our money that's sitting in there. So knowing, what you've spent on a project, what you plan on spending on that project, how much is left to spend, how much is left to collect, and give yourself a good idea
And can you
of
put
where
that
am
in
I.
QuickBooks? Can you put that in QuickBooks or not?
QuickBooks will do a work in progress report. You can do that, or you can do outside of QuickBooks in a spreadsheet to where you can look at a bigger picture outside of QuickBooks and look at overall company cash flow and overall like cash position at the end of the day. You can take into account credit card debt and other lines of credit and things of that nature and get a good picture of where you are, at any given point in time.
Because I see some guys get in trouble because they've done the work, they haven't billed for it yet, but they've incurred the debt. When
Yeah.
they figure out what they've spent on the project, they don't really know either because they got, as you said, deposits up front, or they've done the work and haven't billed for it. So how do you actually, given those numbers, tell where you really are? It seems to be difficult.
Yeah, it is. I mean, you have to be, and I mean, our industry is not known for this. I mean, you have to be a little organized and kind of regimented, and you got to embrace technology a little bit and have some solid spreadsheets. If there are any contractors out there still doing it on a yellow legal pad, that's going to be hard to keep track of where you are and where you're going. Um, the biggest thing is just starting, and this is where the guys we've worked with, the fact that we've run a construction company, we still run a construction company. We know how to do all what it is that they're doing on a day-to-day basis. Like the first thing just starts with a good estimate and making sure you're using the same estimate format and cost codes from job to job, a good solid estimate with solid numbers in there, and use that as your template for that project, and always making sure you're comparing everything that happens after that to that original number. Where am
So
I
now
on this
I
line
can
item
see,
over and over?
I can see, for example, if you've gotten your bids from some contractors, those are solid numbers because they have to live with them, right? Because they're the
Yeah,
subcontractors.
exactly.
But when you're doing your own labor on projects, how do you estimate how long it's going to take to frame something or what your own labor is going to be? Seems to me you could get in real trouble there by either under or overestimating that number.
You can, that is, and unless you're in a cost plus scenario, but even in contracts where a cost plus scenario with a client, no client, or most clients, I'll say, no, most clients are not going to want to hear that. Well, it just took a lot longer than I thought it was going to on any individual line item that you're self-performing. So I mean, we're big advocates, for subcontracting and a lot of stuff just to keep yourself out of trouble. But I mean, the best way is really just historical data. Looking at probably if you have self-performed a lot of work. If you're lucky to be in that situation where you can go back and look at past projects. Okay, traditional house, a lot of interior detail, a lot of trim, a lot of exterior trim work. Okay, similar square footage. Okay, at the end of the day, how many hours did we spend doing an individual, exterior trim, interior trim, for how long did it take us to frame it, and things of that nature. But doing that requires you to be regimented about how everyone is reporting their time. Is the staff attributing how many hours they've spent every day on the individual cost code for
You
that
track that with
project?
how do you track that with phones or how do you track those numbers?
That can be a lot of different ways. We have folks that use their project management softwares, whether it's Procore, Builder Trend, Co-Construct, which will soon go away. They'll use time reporting apps within there. We have companies still that just use a spreadsheet that the superintendent's on site or project managers, but we're responsible for filling in everyone's time. And then when it comes time for payroll to be turned in, they turn in a spreadsheet that goes job name, cost code for each line item, how many hours. The office knows how many, what the rate is for every employee. And that's where using QuickBooks desktop versus online, when you're really trying to do, excuse me, when you're really trying to do job costing for your labor, particularly for companies that are self-performing a lot of work. Um, using job costing for your labor is critical, because that will, and you've probably seen this, where if you're self-performing a lot of work, that labor number will get away from you really
Right.
quickly.
And that will absorb a
And
lot of your profit.
no,
Now,
yeah, without a doubt.
let's talk about, I'm talking about profit. Let's talk about, when do you recommend using cost plus? Because you're, you're an accounting company, excuse me, a bookkeeping company as well as a contractor.
Construction
When do
company.
you use cost plus and when do you use fixed price? And do you have any suggestions on that?
It depends on the project and the client. Cost plus, you have to have a client that has a little bit of tolerance for the numbers, possibly going north of where they started. We've had clients that say, "Hey, I just want it done to the nth degree. I want absolutely flawless construction. I don't care what it costs." They're not even watching the numbers. As long as it's beautiful at the end of the day, they could care less what it costs. That's not most clients. Um, so I'd say, lump sum versus cost plus. If you have a project where it's solid numbers, um, you trust all the sub numbers you have in there, you feel like you have good numbers in there for your own labor, your own supervision, you're happy with your overhead and profit. And if you feel like there is a good opportunity when it comes times to say, what they call buying the job out, if you feel like there's a good opportunity when you buy the job out to save money on those line items, the lump sum contract, is the way to go at the end of the day. I know for us, some of our most profitable jobs have been, lump sum projects where we were able to beat our original estimate. And some of those were in competitive bid situations. So we weren't going into there, with the lowest number we had to just to get the job, even though it was competitive bid. But we just ended up with projects, timing was right, and you have to have staff that's willing to kind of put in the legwork to shop it around a little bit and try and find a better deal here and there, or try and figure out how to get it done with a little less labor. But I know it goes back and forth who likes, people that like cost plus, people that like lump sum. Um, and I know each market's a little different also. Some markets are a little more
I know
tolerant
in
of
the
cost
remodeling
plus.
market, it's more lump sum, but also now what about when you're doing cost plus? Where, because a lot of these guys don't know where to bury stuff, for lack of a better term, in like overhead. They look at overhead and profit, they put all their supervision in there.
Mhm.
So when you're looking at cost plus, what do you put in division one, which a lot of people might put in overhead and profit that
So
makes the
we,
cost plus work?
yeah, so we break out in Division One our site superintendent, who's usually full time, so 40 hours a week plus on the project, and we also break out project management. So the person from the office that's pushing all the paperwork and asking all the questions and keeping everything organized for the project, handling all the financial accountability, writing change orders, things of that nature. So we break that out in Division One, and our Division One is typically about 10% of our subtotal job cost. So before markup of our job, is $1 million. Our Division One is usually going to be somewhere around 10% of that number. Um, I know a lot of companies bury that number in their overhead and profit. And that kind of, because that's a little market specific also. We have a version of our company out in Colorado. In that market, all the builders out there, they all bury it in their overhead and profit. But their overhead and profit is also their overhead and profit is like 30%, where our markup shows a lot lower, but we're burying that cost in Division One.
So
Um,
let's say division one covers a lot of what people consider overhead, which is supervision and that kind of stuff.
yeah.
Everything else you can throw in division one. And then when you've got to actual overhead and profit, what numbers do you find work and are competitive, at least in the Washington DC market, for projects that are a couple million? What
Yeah,
can you get paid 10% in division one? What can you get in overhead and profit and still get the job?
so overhead profit, everyone we compete against, and there's about a half dozen builders that we compete against on a regular basis. And the architects are pretty candid with their feedback about where everyone is for markup, because they'll tell you if you're high. Uh, Most of our projects are right between 15 and 18%. Usually it's about 12% overhead, and then somewhere between 3 to 6% uh, for profit on there. And that's typically what everyone wants to see. And DC is a super competitive market. The
Now, in the
clients
bottom
are,
line, what do you end up netting on that job when it's all said and done? Hopefully it's more than 3%.
it depends on the project. Sometimes if if we take it on the chin because we're trying to protect the architect and maybe there was some mistakes, so it, absorb some cost to make sure they look at the end of the day, the numbers are going to be a little slimmer. If it's a project we were able to, great buyout, and good numbers, at the beginning, and good superintendent and project manager team that was really able to kind of keep change orders to a minimum and push the schedule and get us out of there faster than we were supposed to be. That number will creep up a little higher. But anyway, I mean, worst case scenario is usually 3%, best case 7-8%. At the end of the day, usually not more than that on 15. But
And that's on a project that's 2 to 3 million, give or take, right?
yeah, I think so.
Okay. So now let's say it's the airport question. You're in an airport, the contractor, he's struggling. He does about 2 million, can't make any money, doesn't know why. Just seems he made more as a carpenter than he was as a owning construction company. Do you have okay, make sure you check out she'll run the company. These are the 3 essential things that you really need to know to make a small construction company work, or construction company that's doing 5 million or whatever. What do you think those would be?
So this first one is just a solid estimating practice. So a spreadsheet where you have, and this is, and I learned this early on for myself. If you're starting from a spreadsheet that is not pre-filled out with at least all the line items that you can see, inevitably you're going to forget something. I know a lot of contractors. I've been doing this forever. I know everything. I don't. I got it all in my head. I tell you, I forgot to put silt fence in. Oh, I forgot radon mitigation. Oh, I forgot to do the vapor barrier line item. Starting with a spreadsheet for every job that is the same spreadsheet that has all the line items in there that you would use on every single job, and going down that list to make sure you haven't missed anything. That is number one, because that was a mistake I made early on when I was doing all the estimating. I think I'd just remember everything, and inevitably I'd forget. There'd be something I'd forget. So I think starting there. Second, establishing good relationships with subcontractors, so that you can try, even when it's an early ballpark number, so that you can rely on a subcontractor to give you some solid feedback on what it's going to cost. Constantly shooting from the hip on every project is going to get you in trouble eventually. You're going to get awarded a project where you're going to grossly underestimate the number. The client's going to tell you, tough, I'm not paying the extra. This was the number you gave us, particularly on, and I don't care lump sum or cost plus. Even on a cost plus job, a client really doesn't like it, doesn't think they want to pay it, they're going to tell you to pound sand. And most of our clients have more money than we do, can afford more expensive attorneys. So you'll likely end up absorbing it. To avoid that, try and get in with a good group of subcontractors that you can rely on to give you good numbers. And that comes with not changing subcontractors on every single project. If a subcontractor knows he can rely on you for a steady flow of work, he's going to be willing to do the estimating work, even though it's for projects that, he knows he may not get and that you may not get. So I think there's those 2 things. And then 3, making sure you're tracking what you're spending at the end of the day on projects. So when you're estimating new projects, you can go back and look and say, what did we spend? And that's where most contractors these days, everyone's using some kind of project management software. Having software that can integrate with your QuickBooks so that you can easily jump in there and look and see, okay, what did I spend on framing material at the end of the day on this project? Looking to see what you spent there. If it's a similar scope to what you're doing now, you could look at that as kind of a gut check, or even on your own labor. We self-perform a lot of the smaller carpentry and finer carpentry tasks on our projects. A lot of times we'll do the demolition ourselves. Going back and looking at past projects, okay, what did we spend? Was it higher or lower than what we thought we were going to spend? What did that work out to by square foot, by linear foot, by whatever? And using that to kind of educate yourself. So the next estimate, you're always getting a little bit better and a little bit better and a little bit better. We're at a point now we can look at a project without even turning on the computer and usually tell you off the top of our head what that job is going to cost within 7% of where the number actually comes up, because we've just done it so many times, and we rely on the numbers that we have in history, and historically they're accurate. then you just kind of know. So those three things, I'd say,
Okay.
solid estimating form that you use time and time again, looking at all the line items, a good group of subs you can lean on. Don't change subs every single job that you can lean on for numbers. And then three, looking at historical data. What did you spend on past projects when you're estimating a new one?
Okay. Next, let's talk a little bit about change orders. A lot of guys, I think, end up losing money on change orders. Has that been your experience, and how do you prevent it?
Change orders, that is a common misperception by clients. They think, we're making a killing on change orders. Now, unless it's a huge change order that you're marking up, 15%, and we do too on change orders. And I stress to everyone to do this. When we write change orders, every single change order has project manager's time and superintendent's time. Because every single change order, you're standing around on site for who knows how many hours talking about this change order. What are we going to do? That's all time out of your day, time that your superintendent and project manager could be spending doing something else. Particularly if you have a superintendent that wears the tool bags and he should be swinging a hammer, when he's got to stand there for 3 hours with the interior designer and you trying to figure out, how the built-ins are supposed to work that got added late in the game on the project. That is time you're not going to recoup and lost productivity. So adding that to a change order, and all change orders, we have a minimum fee we put on there, $250 for the project manager on every single change order, regardless of what it is, and then it just goes up from there. So I think capturing your time there and being fair to yourself. I mean, they take a lot of time to process, a lot of calling the subcontractors, calling the suppliers. Don't shortchange yourself by feeling like you need to give it away by not putting project management time on there. And you can justify it. I mean, anyone that doesn't understand it, it's their loss. But that, and I mean, big change orders are great because if you're getting your markup on a big change order, that's $100,000. Okay, that's worth, you're making money on that change order.
Right.
Smaller change orders, I mean, it's hard to recoup. I mean, if it's a change order that's a few grand and you're only getting your 15% on it, I mean, inevitably the amount of time you've put into trying to build that change order, like sometimes, I'm not gonna lie, we run into this where, change orders, like we probably should have charged 40 hours of project manager's time at $135 an hour for a change order that's only worth, $5,000. No one's going to pay that, but so
And you
trying to
find out
avoid.
some people, they fail to invoice for stuff because I know you've worked with some contractors. You went back in with them and worked with them. You found sort of paid for
Yeah.
stuff by stuff
Well,
they
that's
missed.
a big, and that is a big one with the costs with the folks we see. Well, cost plus and lump sum, where, when we go back and, clean up their books and look at their projects and say, hey, you've got, you know, X line items that are, way over budget. Is there a change order that probably should have been written to capture this? And they go, oh yeah, that's right. We did switch from, a shingle, asphalt shingle roof to, something a little nicer, a faux slate or a 3-tab shingle instead of the single tab or something. Like, oh, we forgot to write that change order. Or on cost plus jobs, that's a big one on cost plus jobs, even with folks working with, outside bookkeeping services, 9 times out of 10, people will just keep dumping costs into that uncategorized category because a lot of bookkeeping services out there are just, one fixed fee for the month. So the less work they have to do, the better. So they're more than happy just to dump uncategorized cost into that one line item and let you worry about it at the end of the day. When we've gone back and dissected all job costs and figured out, hey, where should these have gone? Particularly at a cost plus job, inevitably there's massive amounts of costs to do. We did this one company, we went back, they were only doing 2.5 million. We went back and cleaned up their previous year's books, went through all of their credit card statements, bank statements, figured out what they spent everywhere. We captured them almost $200,000 in costs they hadn't billed. Now, getting that out of the client, that's another story.
That's true. At least you know they know.
But at least we know you lost it and you can at least go back and ask,
Right. So,
not good.
Darren, this is really helpful. If people want to get a hold of you regarding your, bookkeeping service, how should they reach you?
Yeah, so go to our website, www.onbudget.co. Go to our website, and in there is an info tab to get in touch with us. Just click there, fill out the contact form, shoot it over, and we'd be happy to chat.
And you'll do your discovery call at no cost, just sort of find out if it's a good fit.
Yeah, we'll talk about how you're operating now, who's doing your books, what platform are you using, what kind of project management software you're using, what type of contract vehicles are you using for the projects you're on now, how many credit cards, how many employees, we're doing just to figure out kind of where they are. And this works. We'll do this. We can do this for, you know, developers that are doing spec homes as well. But our core competency is working with, you know, custom builders, remodelers. That's where I can be the most help to them.
How big does a company need to be to sort of make sense for you to work with?
For us, I'd say anyone doing, you know, $500,000 or more is worthwhile to put the time in. And we have found historically we will cost less money than hiring a full-time employee.
Great. Cool. Thanks, Darren. Appreciate you being here. And if you have any questions, I definitely call Darren.
Great. Thanks, Paul.